Hey everyone, this is Mr. K, and here's part 10 of the Precalculus summer homework, solving rationals. The first problem, looking at it, whenever you have a fraction equals a fraction, you can always do this thing, it's called cross multiplying. A lot of students, like, whenever they see fractions, they get all crazy with like, oh, I just cross multiply, and that's only when you have a fraction equals another fraction. There's no other addition or subtraction in between in there. So here I can just cross multiply, and I would get 50, and that's going to equal 2x squared. And now it's just a matter of solving like you normally would. So divide both sides by 2 first, and you get 25 equals x squared. I would then square root both sides. You cannot forget the plus or minus, and so you should get x equals plus or minus 5. And then the one thing we need to also state, again with restrictions, is that x cannot equal 0, because when you look back at the original problem, x is in the denominator, so x cannot equal 0 because you cannot divide by 0. Once you get to more complicated problems where there's like a bunch of fractions running around, honestly, I just start off with my restrictions. I know that x can't equal 0. And then after that, I multiply by the lowest common denominator to just get rid of the fractions. So I know that 3 goes into 6, but I also know that I have an x down there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply all of these fractions times 6x. And so what ends up happening is for the first fraction, 6 divided by 3 is 2. So I'm really multiplying, getting rid of the fraction, and I'm multiplying by 2x. And so 2x times 2 is 4x. Looking at the next one, the 6's will cancel, and I'm left with just x times 5, so minus 5x. And that's going to equal, now here the x's cancel, and you're left to 6 times 1, which is 6. And so now it made my life so much easier. I can combine like terms here to get negative 1x, and that's going to equal 6. I can then divide both sides by negative 1, and we should get x equals negative 6, but we know that x cannot equal 0. That is our final answer. Same thing here, get rid of the fraction. So I'm going to multiply everything by x. And so I'll have x squared. Here the fraction goes away just as planned, and that's going to be 6. And then that's going to equal 5x. I'm going to subtract the 5x on both sides because this is now going to go to our previous work where if I have x squared minus 5x plus 6, that's going to equal 0. You can now solve this either by factoring, or you can solve it by quadratic formula, or there's a bunch of different ways you can solve it. I personally am going to factor this because I know it factors to x minus 3, x minus 2 equals 0, and so that I know x equals 2 or x equals 3. And as far as restrictions, looking back at the original, we know that x cannot equal 0. So we need to state all of that information. The next problem, again, very similar. Here the common denominator is 6, so I'm going to multiply everything by 6. 6 and 3, those will reduce to 2, so I'm really multiplying this by 2. Make sure that is wrapped in parentheses. This one's going to be multiplied by 3, so I'll get 2x plus 2, and then it's going to be minus, now make sure you use parentheses here. It's going to be 3x minus 3 when you distribute that, and that's going to equal 6. And now it's just a matter of we need to distribute the subtraction sign here. We get 2x plus 2 minus 3x plus 3. And that's going to equal 6. And now it's just keep working your way through. I can simplify this to just negative 1x plus 5, and that's going to equal 6. I can then subtract 5 on both sides, and I'll get negative 1x equals 1. Divide both sides by negative 1, and you should get x equals negative 1. And there are no restrictions because we do not have an x in the denominator anywhere. The last problem here, it's probably I'd say one of the more complicated ones. Again, we have, like the first problem, we have fraction equals fraction, so I know I can cross multiply. Just make sure that we are wrapping those in parentheses. And so when I do x plus 5 times x plus 1, again, that's that double distribute or FOIL, and you should end up with x squared plus 6x plus 5, and that's going to equal negative 7x plus 21. And now, again, whenever you have like something like this, it's a quadratic equation, you're going to want to get all the junk over to the same side. So I'm going to add 7x, I'm going to subtract 21, and I end up with x squared plus 13x minus 16, and that's going to equal 0. If you go to try and factor this, it's not factorable, so you're left with doing the quadratic formula. If you do the quadratic formula correctly, and again, I'm not going to go through that, there's a previous video on that, but you should have x is going to equal negative 13 halves plus or minus the square root of 233 over 2. If you want to leave it like that, you can. If you want to do the decimals, I think one's ends up being like negative 14 point something and positive 1, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then the only other thing we need to worry about is restrictions. We need to say that x cannot equal 3 or negative 1. And that would be our final answer for number 5. I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope you have a great day.